Hare Little introduction about Maharaj. We have a special guest, his own Candramauli Maharaj. Let's give a big round of applause. So he doesn't need an introduction, but however, there are quite a few new people here today. Candramauli Maharaj is the direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who is the founder of ISKCON. He's been serving as practicing and also serving for 5 decades. 5 decades. That says something. So he's a traveling monk, and then he's a preacher, he's a guru, initiating guru, he's an author, yes, his books is also out there, and he travels around the world. Okay. So, but he's an author, he has books today.
He is distributing today.
And then more
setting an example for our book distribution.
Yes. Right now as we're talking, there is another team, they're distributing the books in Nepali program. There's another program going on. So he was a temple president in early 90s for this temple.
Yeah.
Maharaj is the temple president, so early 90s. So without any further delay, so program starts at 11:30, 12:30, but however, we'll go beyond 12:30 today. I'll tell, Sindar, we can tell Pujari to go a little slow also. We'll continue. So, Hare Krishna, one more time, let's be a big round of applause for Maharaj.
Very impractical table. Doesn't work. Take this away, it doesn't work. Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Suswagatam. You don't know that one, Suswagatam. Swagatam means welcome, and Suswagatam means very welcome. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyanajana Salakaya Chaksurundalitam Yanatasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Maum Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravadi Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Vancha Kalpa Dhurvasya Sindhu Pevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare. So from this is the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's a whole series of slokas centered around the activities of one personality name is Jambil. Now, Jambil was a personality who, as he grew up as a young boy, he was very devotional. But somehow or other he got diverted in his devotional life by seeing something he should have never saw. And that was a prostitute on the streets with another low-class man. His mind got disturbed. This is something unusual for him because he was not accustomed to anything like that, nor did the culture at that time have any, what we say, evidence or what we say, incidents of people on the streets acting licentiously. But this time it happened. And his mind got really disturbed, but it got so disturbed that he became attracted. There's two kinds of disturbances. One is one becomes averse to something, and one becomes attracted to something. Both of them are what you might say disturbances, because if we get unnecessarily attracted, that's a disturbance. And if we get averse to something, it causes us to become very unhappy. So now Ajamil has somewhat been liberated from his situation. He fell down, took up what we say household life, but he married a prostitute. And his whole life was simply trying to satisfy her needs. She had very high-class needs. And in order for him to maintain her, he had to do things that were illegal, such as stealing, kidnapping, and so many other things. So you can see here's a boy that was very much devotion in his early life, but his mind simply got attracted to something that he shouldn't have got attracted to. And that became so deep in his consciousness that he couldn't get rid of it. And then that forced him to actually take up the activity of household life with this person, prostitute. But then again, somehow or other, because of his past, what we say, religious and spiritual practice, at the time of death, just before that, he had named his son, the last son. He had many children. He was 86 years old when he conceived his last child. Haribo. It's not Haribo. It's uh-oh. Different version of Haribo. And so he had a 3-year-old child and he was 88 years old, but he was almost like a grandfather. We know what grandfathers are to young children. They get very attached. And even though it was his son, he was overly attached. And he named his son Narayan, which is the name of the Supreme Lord. And Narayan, do this. Narayan, come here. Narayan, bring my shoes. Narayan, come and sit on my lap. Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. So now, somehow by the arrangement of the Lord, he named his child by the name of the Supreme Lord. And because he did that, he was always chanting the names of the Lord. And then, of course, at the time of death, when death came along, the first thing he thought of was his son. And he called in a very helpless way out to his son. But when he called the name of Narayan. Of course, that was his son's name, but it was also the name of the Supreme Lord. And when he called with such, what we say, helplessness, desperation, he remembered. By that calling, it brought back his remembrance of the same Supreme Lord. And therefore, he was saved from going to, what we say, Yamaraj, who's in charge of souls who are sinful. And he sent his, what we say, servants to take the soul of Ajamil to him, but they were thwarted by the Vishnu Dutas, the messengers that come from the Vaikuntha planets, who are, what we say, servants directly of Lord Narayana. So, and of course, he was saved from going to hell, and then he got another chance. He had to leave his body, but no, actually not. He didn't leave his body. He went on to hardware, and for the last 12 years, he perfected his life and went back to the spiritual world. Although his life was mostly sinful, he was saved by the chanting of the holy name. Although he chanted in what we call Namabas, and there is pure chanting, that's called Sudanam, and then there's Namabas, chanting with an element of devotion, but not pure devotion. And then there's Namaparad, which we have to avoid, that is chanting with offenses. So here, I'm going to read a few verses here that kind of illustrates what happened when his Yamaraj's servants came back and they were thwarted in their service to bring Ajamil to Yamaraj. And so he's now instructing his servants about his position and the glories of the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. So here, this verse says, devotional service, beginning with the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is the ultimate, make a note of that, ultimate religious principle for the living entity in human society. So out of all of the activities in spiritual life, the essence is to glorify the Lord. And the essence of that glorification is as given by the Lord himself, the chanting of his holy name. And of course, that is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Lord has many names, but the topmost name and the recommended name, and the name that was chanted by the incarnation of the Lord Chaitanya was Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we'll go on to the next verse, and it says, now Yamaraj continues with his instructions to his servants. He says, my dear servants, you are good as my sons. Just see how glorious is the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The greatly sinful Ajamil chanted only to call his son, not knowing that he was chanting the Lord's name. Nevertheless, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, he remembered Narayan, and thus he was immediately saved from the ropes of death. In Prabhupada's short purport, I'll read that. There is no need to conduct research into the significance of chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. The history of Ajamil is sufficient proof of the power of the Lord's holy name and the exalted position of a person who chants the holy name incessantly. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has advised, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Eva Kevalam, Hello, Nasteva, 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 Gatir Amrita. There is no other way, no other way, no other way. So you may ask, well, why do we do other things? Why do we worship the deity? Why do we discuss Shastra? Why do we do other kinds of activities? Because to come to the actual perfection of chanting the holy name requires a level of purification. The holy name, although is Krishna and it's easily available, still there it can be, one can commit offenses in chanting the holy name. So the whole process of bhakti includes these other activities which help to bring one to what is called the mode of goodness. And from the mode of goodness, then one can chant the holy name and gradually transcend that mode and go to pure chanting. So these other activities are essential. Although the glories of the holy name are sent throughout the Shastras. There's one verse by Lord Brahma, who is the topmost living entity within the universe. And he says, Iti Sodarsakam Nam Nam, Kali Kamas Nasanam, Nata Paratayopayo, Sarva Vedashu Drishyate. Translation, after searching through all Vedic literatures, one cannot find a more easy, direct, and sublime process of self-realization in this age of Kali, Kalir Dosha Nidhi, in this age of Kali, then these 16 names, and then the verse ends, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the last line in this purport, in this age of Kali. So we are in the age of Kali. Maybe we're not so much familiar, but this is one of the most difficult ages of mankind. There are 4 ages: Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and then Kali Yuga. Each one is more and more, as you go down the line, more and more saturated with sinful activities, especially in this age. This is called the age of darkness, the age of hypocrisy, the age of lying, cheating. There's a whole list of wonderful things that people do in the name of living in the world, when it's actually all sinful. So this is a very difficult age. But here it says, in this age, no one can perform all of the ritualistic ceremonies for becoming free, liberated. That is extremely difficult. Therefore, all of the Shastras and all of the great souls, the Acharyas, have recommended that in this age, one chant, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Next verse. And therefore, it should be understood that one is easily relieved of all sinful activities by chanting the Hare Krishna. Simply by chanting the holy name, whatever sinful activities that you may have to experience, in other words, whatever activities we perform, there is a reaction for that according to the quality of the activity. So sinful activities are easy to perform in this age. Just like here's a sinful activity that we perform not even knowing it. If you're walking on the street and you step on some ants or kill some bugs, you get a reaction for that. You can't kill anything. But how can you avoid that? You can't. Practically, we see there are certain religious traditions, they cover their mouth so that when they breathe, they don't kill germs. Of course, it's not foolproof, but this is what they believe. So to kill any living entities, just like when you eat, you also have to somehow kill living entities in order to cook, produce food. But the point is, if you do it as a service to God, to the Lord, to Krishna, there is no reaction for that. But if we do it for our, what is called for personal gratification, then immediately there'll be a reaction, and the reaction will come out in due course of time. So here, the one who chants the holy names of the Lord, whatever accumulation of any kind of wrong activities we have performed, which we are due to get the reaction, all of that is nullified by the chanting of the holy name in due course of time. So chanting is so spiritually powerful, and at the same time, so easy, you might say. It's available. When it comes to chanting many of the mantras in the Vedic literatures, you have to chant those mantras very carefully. Here, it says here, I'll go on, it says, this is the only process recommended for relief of sinful reactions. We're talking about the age of Kali. If one chants the holy name with improper pronunciation, sometimes devotees do that. Just like he was chanting Ramo before, it's Rama, but anyway. But he's on another level, so we can't. So that's Ramo is not part of the mantra, it's Rama. So even if one chants improperly, still there is benefit from that, as it says here. Even if one chants the Lord's name with improper pronunciation, he will achieve relief from material bondage if he chants without offenses. Ajamil, for example, extremely simple, but while dying he merely chanted the holy name, and though calling his son, he achieved complete liberation, freedom from the cycle of birth and death, and because he remembered the name of the Lord Narayan. So this is the mercy of the holy name. Many of the mantras, most of the mantras, if you're performing different types of ritualistic ceremonies, if you chant the mantras wrong, you don't get the full results. And if you chant continuously wrong, the whole activity is null and void. But the holy name is, when we say, merciful, because it's Krishna coming in this age. And Krishna knows Therefore, he's given us the process, which you might say is both elevating and very, what we say, merciful at the same time. Golokeda, Premadana, Harinam, Sankirtan. So this chanting of the holy name is not coming from any part of any material universe. It's coming directly from the spiritual world. This is the activities of Krishna in the spiritual world. They glorify Krishna by chanting his holy name. And especially the Maha Mantra, which is in Vrindavan. The Maha Mantra is Radha, Rani, and Krishna. Because Hare is the energy of the Lord, the internal spiritual energy of the Lord, personified as the Srimati Radharani. So when you chant the holy name, it's a pure mantra. It's Hare. Hare actually refers to Srimati Radharani. Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Then you might say, well, is that Ramchandra? Is it Lord Balaram? It is, if you want it to be. But there are people who have different moods of worship. So there are those in Vrindavan who are devotees of Krishna. They say Rama is Raman, or the husband of the goddess of fortune, Srimati Radharani. Radhika Raman is also Krishna. Okay. So the whole mantra actually is Radha and Krishna. For Gaudiya Vaishnavas, for others it could be Ramchandra, but still that's the personality of God also. Cool. So this chanting is very merciful. And it says, there's one verse, it says that the name of Krishna is Krishna. But the name of Krishna is more merciful than Krishna. Can you figure that out? How can the name of someone be more merciful than the person who is being named? So this is the extra special mercy in this age, that if you commit an offense to Krishna, say you commit offense to the deities, just like if you sit with your legs facing the deities, that's an offense. If you hold your knees like this in front of the deities, that's an offense. This is all mentioned in Shastra, because the deity is the Lord himself. Yeah, Krishna has come in the form of the deity. That's another manifestation of Krishna. Not as merciful as the holy name, but still it's Krishna. So if one makes some offense to Krishna, then one can be relieved at that offense by chanting Krishna's name. But if you pray to Krishna, or you do some ritualistic ceremonies, or do some austerities, perform some fasting, or do some kind of what we say tapasya, in order to relieve yourself, it won't have the effect. Simply chant. That's how merciful the holy name is. It can relieve you of all sinful activities. We have the example, of course the example is Ajamil. It's the prime example actually. It's so sinful. I mean, he was a young boy, he was only a teenager when he actually got involved with this prostitute. And now he's in his 80s. His whole life is simply to live in a very debauched type of atmosphere. And he was committing so many offenses to other living entities in order to get some finances so he could support his household. His wife really wanted to live luxuriously. She was used to it because she was a high-class prostitute. Anyway, so now, therefore, he simply he didn't even chant Krishna's name. We mentioned that. Chant Narayan's name. Narayan is 96% powerful. Krishna is 100% powerful. There's 4% of Krishna that is not in Narayan in terms of his activities, especially his activities in relationship to his devotees in Sri Vrindavan Dham. That is unique quality of Krishna. The highest spiritual attainment is Vrindavan Dham, and that's what Lord Chaitanya came to teach. But then there are lower levels of its spiritual attainment, which are also perfect, and that is the Vaikuntha level. And that is in the area of Lord Narayan. So one can achieve either one, but in our movement, Lord Chaitanya has come to teach Vrindavan. And he's teaching it through the chanting of the holy name. And one other thing that he emphasized very strongly in his teachings and in his personal practice, because Lord Chaitanya is in the role of a devotee. He's not in the role of the Lord. He acts like a pure devotee just to teach how one can learn from his example what it means to practice devotional service. Of course, he's teaching pure devotional service. So in that teaching, I had a point, I forgot it now, because I diverted away from the point. This is called old age. You heard of it? It's like, you read the scriptures, it works. It's just exactly what it says here. So I have a suggestion for all of you. Don't get old. Live long, but don't get old. Right? It's not so much fun up here. Anyway, what was I gonna... Lord Chaitanya, the other religious principle that he wanted to emphasize was Vaishnav Seva. These two are inseparable, the chanting of the holy name and associating with and serving devotees like that. And that has to be proactive, not just occasionally or whenever you think it's convenient. One should look for opportunities to associate with devotees and also look for opportunities to figure out how to serve the devotees. Like, we have our Kamagiri there. She's always finding ways to serve the devotees. When I come, she makes cookies. That was a hint. I had a feeling it already happened. So she likes to serve the devotees, and you see even when she's in this environment here, she finds ways to serve the devotees, because she knows what it means to actually practice Krishna consciousness, what we say, effectively, successfully. And in this material world, we find great happiness when we do something to benefit another person, especially somebody who's dear to us. It gives us happiness, even more than the happiness we achieve from our own activities in relationship to ourselves. We find more happiness doing something for someone else, and when they benefit, our happiness is even greater. Why? Because that's called love. That's love. Love is the supreme form of happiness. Okay, so I'm going to read a little here. There was one associate of Lord Chaitanya, his name is Raghunath Das Goswami. In the assembly of Raghunath Das Goswami's father, Srila Haridas Thakur confirmed that simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one is liberated, even if he does not chant inoffensively, even though he chants offensively. Smarta Brahmanas and Mayavadis do not believe that one can achieve liberation in this way. But the truth of Haridas' statement is supported by many quotations in Srimad Bhagavatam. So there was one person whose name was Gopal Chakravarti. He was in the assembly of Raghunath Das Goswami's father, who was a Jaminder. He was on the level of a billionaire, extremely rich. He had a government job. He would collect taxes, and he would keep a portion of those taxes for his own income. He was so rich, and he had only one son, Raghunath Das Goswami. So one time he held a meeting of so many of the people in the area, and he invited Srila Haridas Thakur, who we know is one of the intimate associates of Lord Chaitanya. He chanted the holy names constantly, continuously. He chanted 333,333 names of God per day, which is 192 rounds. Very well. Should we start a new rule in this country? The problem is, you'll go back to God here quick. Maybe we're not ready to go yet. We have so many other plans. Therefore, Krishna ruins all our plans. So anyway, this person who came, he was a Smarta Brahmin. Smarta means a ritualistic Brahmin. They do worship of the deity for some kind of pecuniary benefit. In other words, they do it for livelihood. And so, and of course, and Haridas was glorifying the holy name, and he was saying, simply by chanting the holy names of the Lord, even in Namabhas, which is not even pure chanting, one can attain liberation. Gopal Chakravarti got really upset. He said, "What are you saying? The scriptures say it's so difficult. You have to perform so many austerities, rituals, chant mantras, perform so many different, what we say, homas. In other words, to get liberation is very difficult. And you're saying, even if you chant the Hare Krishna mantra imperfectly, you can get liberation." And he got angry at Haridas. And it caused a little bit of, what we say, commotion within the assembly. So, and then he said something offensive. He said, "If this is true, then your nose, if what you say is not true, your nose should fall off." Oh, when he said that, of course, the father and uncle of Raghunath Das Goswami, who were conducting this, they got very angry and they threw him out of the assembly. They apologized to Haridas for the offense. Haridas was not offended because the devotee is always Trinadapi Samichena. He can accept whatever people say because he's not disturbed. Why? Because he's connected to Krishna. Therefore, people may say whatever they may say, but the devotee doesn't take it seriously. Or they don't take it personally. So, and then Haridas said, "That's all right, he's just ignorant, he doesn't know." And so 3 days later, the same Chakravarti, his nose fell off. In other words, he got leprosy. And then, although he condemned Haridas, he got the reaction for his offense. But this is just, as it's mentioned here, it doesn't mention the details, but this is the actual episode on how the holy name of the Lord, even if it's chanted imperfectly, can also elevate one to a higher stage in his practice of spiritual knowledge. Here, but it says, it goes on to say, if one always chants the holy name of the Lord with great devotion, in the evening and the morning one can be freed from all material miseries. The whole world's trying to making plans to get free from suffering, right? Everybody's trying. Material life means two things. Do things that bring you about success and happiness, and avoid things that cause you to become unsuccessful. In other words, be happy, avoid misery. This is the life in this world. And it culminates around different activities, but this is the goal. Nobody wants misery, right? Does anybody get up in the morning and say, "Today I'll have a very miserable day"? Hare Krishna. Of course, you say Hare Krishna, it won't be miserable. But yeah, everybody wants to experience happiness. When Prabhupada one time said, "What is the goal of life?" He pointed around, and people were saying everything. And Prabhupada said, "The goal of life is to be happy." But then you have to understand, well, what is happiness and how to find that. And then it comes back to the process of chanting and devotion to Krishna. So here, it goes on. Another quotation confirms that one can achieve liberation even if one hears the holy name of the Lord constantly, every day with great respect. In other words, even by hearing it, even if you're not chanting it, has such potency. If you're hearing what we say, absorbed and hearing the process, you also get the benefit. That's so powerful. One should always chant and hear about the extraordinary, wonderful activity. Now, Prabhupada goes into another saying that the activities of the Lord are on the transcendental platform. The one who hears and chants the glories of the Lord comes to the transcendental platform. In other words, comes to the platform above material suffering, above material illusion, simply by glorifying the Lord. This is the formula. This process of Krishna consciousness is really easy, but we just don't have any time. When Prabhupada was in India before he came to America, he was putting together what we now have is called Back to Godhead magazine. It's a regular bi-monthly magazine. But when Prabhupada started in 1944, and he was putting out like 1 or 2 sheets of paper, he would write an article, and then he would go to the printer personally, would have it printed in bulk, and he would take those copies, and he would go to the tea stalls in Delhi and try to sell them. And so he would do that, and sometimes he would come up, and he would sell it for like 1 paise, 2 paise, maybe. Not even a rupee. Of course, in those days, money was worth much more as it is today. So one time, when he was going, people were saying, "Swamiji, what you're doing is very nice, but we have no time." And he was hearing it quite often. So Prabhupada wrote one article on his next issue of Back to Godhead called "No Time." People got time for everything, but not the most important thing. What is the most important thing is to successfully execute the purpose of life. Life has a purpose. There's a goal to life. Everything that we do, we always seek some kind of result or some goal. Life itself has a goal. What is the goal of, some people say? Life means to eat, sleep, enjoy, be merry, and die. But that's not life, because eating and sleeping is done by the animals, and sometimes even better. So that's not actually the goal of life, or to enjoy the senses. The Bhagavad Gita says, what is it? What is that verse? Vishayam Vinivartante. That's one of them. I'm thinking of the other one, 522 in Bhagavad Gita. 522. Yehi samsparsaja bodha dukayone evate avantakanta kuntaya nateshu ramate buddha. That verse says, sense gratification leads to suffering. That's all. And then the senses are not meant to exploit the objects of the senses and expect to get happiness. Whatever success one may have, they plant further suffering in the future. It's automatic. Because material life is dual. When you have one side, there's another side. If you get material happiness, you'll get that much material suffering. The more material happiness you experience, the more you will experience the same amount of material suffering. It's inevitable. That's how this material energy works. And people don't know that. And that's why they can't figure out why they're suffering. Because they don't know that by putting time and energy to satisfy the senses, they're also planting seeds of suffering which will come in due course of time. So, but one who engages in devotional service, there is no suffering involved. Even if you're unsuccessful in the execution of devotionals, In other words, even if you make an attempt to do something, it doesn't come out ideally. Still, if you are trying to serve nicely, Krishna accepts it and then you benefit. So the quality is secondary, the mood is primary. I want to serve the Lord. And I'm trying my best to do it as nice as I can, but even if it falls short, still, Krishna will accept it because he takes the essence. He's called, what is it, Vedasara. He takes the essence of the, Sara means essence. He takes the essence of our activities. Karma Sara, you might say. But this is not karma, this is bhakti actually. Okay, so these are some things about the holy name. I'll read a little bit more. I know time is a little short. The power of chanting the holy name was proven, of course, by Ajamil. Furthermore, one's psychological condition is completely disturbed at the time of death. In such an awkward condition, it would certainly have been difficult for Ajamil to have chanted clearly. Nevertheless, Ajamil achieved liberation simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord. Therefore, what is to be said of those who are not sinful? It is to be concluded that with a strong vow, one should chant the holy name of the Lord. And Prabhupada mentions again, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
When Srila Prabhupada started this movement, he asked the devotees to chant 64 rounds a day. Just in case you want to know about the history. And the devotees at that time, they were new, was only about a year old in the movement. They said, Swamiji, he was known as Swamiji at the time, Swamiji, we have other things to do, we don't have that much time. Anyway, it's too difficult. Prabhupada considered what they said, and he said 32. Chant 32 rounds a day. And then there was the same, what we say, resistance, discussion, not following. So Prabhupada didn't want to push it, so he said, all right, 16 and no less. So he gave us, this was somewhat concessionary. There are devotees who do chant 64 rounds a day, some chant 32, others chant more. Because it says that one should chant 16 rounds on beats. This is a requirement for those who would take initiation. For those who are not initiation, they can chant whatever numerical vow they can maintain. And gradually, as they continue in that same way, they can increase their chanting like that till you reach 64. I'm sorry, 16. But one, as Prabhupada said, when you're chanting, you'll think 16 rounds. Why not 16,000 rounds? In other words, the taste that comes, the happiness that comes, the elevation of consciousness that is automatically provided. Everything, when you're chanting the holy name, everything in the world doesn't even exist anymore. It's so inclusive and so, what we say, complete, that when you're absorbed in chanting, you're in the spiritual world. You're in pure spiritual consciousness. So the idea is not to stop. Of course, we also do other things. Therefore, any Bengalis here? We have any Bengalis? No Bengalis? No Bengalis? That's strange. All right, I'll chant something in Bengali. Maybe you'll understand it. Hate koro kaje mukhi bolo huri. Hate koro kaje. Work with your hands. Mukhi bolo huri. And chant a holy name. In other words, it's recommended that even if you do other activities, you can chant Hare Krishna. Even though you're not chanting on beats, still the holy name is there. The holy name is also providing what we say elevation in conscious, purity of thought. Everything comes by the chanting of it. So one can chant anytime, any place, anywhere. Nam Nam Akari Bahudani Sarva Shakti Tatarpita Niyamita Smarani Nakalaha Yeah, so There is no rules, regulations, restrictions. One can chant anytime, any place. But for those who are initiated and into the process, one should chant 16 rounds on beats. That is a requirement that comes by way of initiation. But one can chant even those who are initiated, when they're not with their beats, they can chant anytime. And when you're chanting, you're with Krishna. Krishna's name is Krishna. We want to associate with God. Prabhupada was asked, what do you get from chanting? You can actually associate with the Supreme Lord because Krishna's name is Krishna. It's non-different. How do you understand the name of a person is the same as the person? That's not in the material world. We have our name, but our name is different than us. And therefore we can change our name, but that doesn't mean we change. But Krishna's name is him. Because of the nomenclature in the spiritual world is that everything in relationship to the absolute is also absolute. So Krishna's name is Krishna. Krishna's form is Krishna. Krishna's qualities are Krishna. Krishna's pastimes, his activities are also him. So coming in contact with any one of these is coming in contact with the absolute truth. But in this age, the emphasis is on glorification of the Lord. And that glorification, as was mentioned here, is to chant Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
And even if you chant accidentally, just like I know one lady, she was practicing Krishna consciousness for a while, and then somehow or other she started to give it up and went back to her previous activities in the world. One day she was walking along the street where she was living, and one dog, really big fierce dog, barked really loud. She got scared and she said, Hare Krishna! And he said, wow, what did I say? So when we connect, it goes into the subconscious and it stays there. And it'll come out even in what we say difficult situation. It'll come out accordingly. So when we can stay connected to Krishna in the holy name, that is the perfection of association, that is the perfection of consciousness. Always remember Krishna. That's what the scriptures say. I was just talking to Naveen, and I asked him, what can I speak about today? He said, there's only 2 subjects. And I agreed with him because he's quoting Shastra. What are the 2 subjects? The chanting of the holy name, and the living entity. So in this world, there's only 2 things. The holy name and the living entity. Material life is a shadow of something that has no substance. Why is it shadow? Because it's always changing. Changing. Well, think 2 things that are constant, and that is you, the soul, and Krishna in the form of his holy name. Okay, so we'll stop here and see if there's any comments, questions, suggested retractions. Anyone?
Questions? Maharaj, thank you.
And if you want to ask a question related to another subject matter, fine.
Yes,
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your discussion. You mentioned serving the Vaishnavas alongside chanting the holy name, and we understand that that helps increase our taste for the holy name.
Yeah.
Do we understand that even services to the mission are also considered service to the Vaishnava in one sense,
Yeah.
with serving Srila Prabhupada's design?
Yeah, because ultimately everyone is spirit soul. So that even those who are not devotees, they're still pure spirit soul, although they are in a different consciousness. So when you're preaching, you're giving them an opportunity to come closer to Krishna, and that is considered to be, according to Shastra, is considered the best of all services. Why? Because the Lord comes to this world to do that mission. He comes to elevate the conditioned souls. So if you do that, assist him in that, you become very dear to the Lord. Everyone's dear to the Lord, but there's those who are especially dear. And that's those who reach out to others to try to give this message to others. And there's many ways to reach out. So yeah, so if you're supporting the mission, yeah. That's also Vaishnava Seva. But it's actually restated as Jivadoya. Jivadoya. Good. Any?
I have a question. So, we read it, we heard it, full name is not different than Krishna. So if you call Chandra, for example, or Chandra come here, so he come here. So his name is not different, but he comes secondly. So when you say Krishna, it is not there. How one perceives the Krishna holy name is non-different, as in the sadhaka stage also.
Well, theoretically, you accept it because it's been given by the highest authority, Krishna himself. Therefore, but to realize it, that means the chanting has to be somewhat free from offense. When it's free from offense, then when you chant, you get an experience. Something happens. Your consciousness becomes purified. Or your intellect actually becomes, what we say, awakened. Yes. We experience, Krishna's name is Krishna. So when we're starting, we still may chant with some, what we say, offense. Therefore, we can understand from that state that, yes, I should chant Krishna's name, although I'm not realizing Krishna in the form of his name, or not experience it, but I can accept it because the spiritual master says it, Krishna says it, the previous acharyas have said it, everyone enunciates that this process is no different than Krishna's name. So yeah, you can accept it theoretically. But theory leads to ultimately realization if you continue in that same way. And purify the chanting by getting rid of the offenses. And there's 10 offenses. Those of you who live in temples know that every day in our temples we chant the 10 offenses to the holy name as part of the morning program. So we should remember what these 10 offenses are and try to avoid them.
Maharaj, in continuation to Hare Krishna question, how can we develop the taste, right? So when you chant, like always the mind is wandering everywhere. It's very hard to control. So, but we cannot develop taste.
The taste will come when your mind surrenders to the holy name. In other words, Chanchala Himana Krishna. Chanchala, the mind is flickering this way, that way, this way, this way. When you start chanting in the morning, all of a sudden you start remembering all the things you have to do, all of the problems that are going on. It seems like you don't even think of these things until you start chanting. Why does it happen when you start chanting? Because now you're getting purified and these things are coming to the surface. So what you have to do is just let them go. Don't focus on it. And continue to hear. This is the process. Chanting means hearing. And when you hear, you're allowing the holy name to capture your mind through sound vibration. Mind will continue to go, but once you connect with that sound, then the mind will submit to the sound. You can't conquer the holy name with your mind. You have to allow your mind to be conquered by the holy name through the hearing process. Just hear nicely. Practice hearing. That's right. Sometimes we find ourselves deficient in hearing. Why? Because if we live in this world, there's so much noise out there. So the mind sort of blocks out a lot of the activities that go around so it doesn't become disturbed. So our hearing ability is somewhat marginalized in order to protect ourselves from what is going on around there. But when you have to meditate or chant, you have to fully absorb yourself in that sound. Therefore, you have to acquiesce that the perfection of hearing. And how do you do that? Prayer helps also by praying to the Lord that please give me the ability to chant very nicely. Please let me not become distracted while I'm chanting. You can pray like that. And then we also have to listen carefully. Hearing means to listen. Sometimes when we talk to people, we don't listen. We're waiting them to shut up so we can speak. That's usually how sometimes we have conversations. But practice hearing. It's an art. Hearing is an art. And once that you develop it, then you can start to absorb the essence of what you're hearing. And not only what you hear, but the mood by which the sound is being delivered also. That makes hearing complete. Anything else? Anything else? One more question. Radha Vijay. I can see you on the verge of asking something, but you're so...
A little bit. Thank you for that class, Marge. There is something that I think about quite often, like, so in this age of Kali, it seems like we've been given instructions to be like perfect. Like, don't do this, don't do that, make sure you study, make sure you, like, we gotta be like the most perfect monks or devotees ever. But when you look at previous Kali Yugas, like, it seems that they weren't instructed to be like pure devotees and do this for Krishna and da-da-da. But also, I'm like, but they had more Shakti than us, they had better memories than us, they were more devotional than us, they had powers than us. So they weren't required to do that.
Because
we get these bodies and we're like the most degraded,
Yeah.
you know, have all these mistakes and cheating and da-da-da-da. I was like, how are we expect to be perfect in this age with these conditions in our lives?
Very well. Kamagiri, you want to answer that one? Thank you for being honest. Yeah, well, like you say, previous ages, people were more highly qualified. So, you know, they didn't have to be what we see instructed in these things because the qualifications were already developed, especially in the Sachi Yuga. Do your best. Krishna takes the essences. He says, practice, he says. When Arjuna says, you know, Chanchala himana Krishna pramati balavadra tasyahami gavamaya mayar idam suduskaram. He said, Krishna, you're asking me to control my mind, but I think it's like controlling the wind. It's so difficult, it's unsteady, turbulent. And Krishna said, you're right. But, he said, by constant practice, there's the word, and detachment from material activities, one can control the mind. In other words, one can bring the mind under one's direction. So there's the formula of the practice. And nobody's going to criticize you for not being perfect, because nobody's perfect anyway. So the thing is, we just have to keep making that attempt. And as you make the attempt, Krishna also sees that, oh, this person's trying. So he helps. He sends someone to give you some advice, or he also speaks to you within your own heart, within your own mind. He helps if you're trying. So never get discouraged, though. That's the point. Sometimes devotees think, oh, I'm chanting, and I'm not getting any taste from chanting. I should give it up and do something else. I can use my time. otherwise. No, even if you're not chanting even if you're chanting without taste, just keep chanting. And gradually, as you give up the offenses, the taste will start to come. And it's sweet. It's very sweet. Krishna's name is the sweetest of the sweet. Because everything about Krishna is wonderful. And his name is the most wonderful. It's not that we just pronounce the name and that's it. No, there's a sweet taste that comes from that. Yes, come
Thank
on.
you, Maharaj, for always coming and enlightening us with your Krishna Katha, your Kirtan, just your presence alone brings so much joy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, a little bit louder.
But could you mentioned the holy name is more merciful than Krishna. Could you explain that?
Yeah, because, I did earlier. If you commit offense to Krishna, even if you pray to him directly, you may not get relieved of that. But if you chant the holy names, then that will give you the relief from the reaction. So Lord Chaitanya has set up the process. Chant the holy names, and then even if you commit offenses to the Supreme Lord, you can be freed from those offenses by continuously chanting like that. The only offense you can't get freed from by chanting the holy name is Vaishnava Aparad. When you offend a devotee, then even the holy name can't save you. Why? Because devotees are so dear to Krishna that when you defend a devotee, that Krishna also becomes unhappy with you, and you lose Krishna's mercy. But you can get that mercy back by doing what is called retribution. What is that? You go to that devotee, fall at his feet, offer obeisances, apologize for any offense, and ask for service. And usually Vaishnavas don't take offense. Sometimes when someone thinks they have offended the devotee doesn't even remember. He says, of course, I forgive you. I don't even remember. So devotees don't take offense generally, mostly, 99.9%. But therefore, the holy name is so powerful that all of the other forms of what we say, deviations, offenses, wrong activities can be nullified by chanting the holy name. So powerful. And Prabhupada said, sometimes you lose your taste of Krishna consciousness. You think, I don't have any taste. Why should I get up in the morning? When I read the books, I don't get anything. And Prabhupada said, just sit down and chant and the taste will come back. It will. It comes back automatically. So that's the mercy of Krishna's name. Can't be described. It is what is say. You can't overestimate the glories of the holy name. You can only underestimate the glories of the holy name. Yeah. And if you chant, you'll see. You'll have an experience directly. Okay, so anything else before we leave? This book is quite interesting. It's called Rooted in Devotion. It's about the Gitanagari farm in Pennsylvania. Srila Prabhupada in 1977, just before he left the world, he wanted to go to Gitanagari to teach us how to live on the land. He said, I'm going to show you personally. So Prabhupada put a lot of, what we say, attention to that farm project. And it's been going on since, I think Gitanagari started in the 1970s, even before the 70s, I think at the end of the 60s. So it was one of Srila Prabhupada's favorite farm projects, simple living, cow protection, agriculture, back to the land. and complete dependence on Krishna. When you live simply, you automatically find yourself becoming more dependent on Krishna. And that's the process. We think, all right, I can depend on my car, I can depend on this, I can depend on that, I can depend on that. And we forget about Krishna. We put more attention towards the things that surround our life to fulfill our needs. But these things are ephemeral. They can change at any time. But when living more simply, it fosters dependence on Krishna. And that fosters our, what we say, bhakti. So this is a beautiful, this is done by Satyaraj Prabhu, and it covers the whole history of Gita Nagari from the very beginning to the present day. Interviews many of the devotees, including Bhakti Tirtha Swami when he came there in the end of the 1990s to help regenerate the mood of Gita Nagari at that time. And since he came there, the community has been going up, 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 up. So, but and then there's a whole history about Radha Damodar, the deities that Prabhupada, I can't remember the history of where they came from. They were traveling Sankar. They used to travel all over the United States in a bus. And Prabhupada gave the name Damodar. Damodar means one who's bound around the waist with a rope. When he was traveling in the bus, the deity was shaking. Prabhupada said, tie him up. Prabhupada gave the name Damodar. And it has so many other things. I mean, there's a whole listing. Spiritual foundation, the Gita concept, the reality, Vanarshram, Goraksha, the glories of Radha Damodar, the voices of Gita Nagari over the history of Gita Nagari's existence. It's a nice little book. I practically gobbled it up when I first came in. It's just so interesting. And Satyaraj is a scholar. He writes very, very expertly. I mean, his writing, he makes everything clear and also very, very, what we say, academic in his presentation. So, if you're interested, we just ask a donation of $20 for these books. If you can't afford 20, give whatever you can afford. If you can't afford nothing, take a book. Okay, so yeah, I'm always concerned that the devotees spend more time in a more simplified lifestyle because that, again, fosters Krishna consciousness and it helps us get away from this civilization which is killing us, really. In the United States now, more than 60% of the population is sick. These are statistics. Why? Because food, mostly because of food, pesticides, herbicides, various types of artificial ways of producing food, water is another thing, and of course, 5G, that's another one. And I don't want to go into all of these details, but what I'm saying is that Krishna taught us really by his own example that simple living and Krishna consciousness, of course, is the foundation for a progressive life, both materially and spiritually. We could talk about this for a long time, but it's not, but the time is not available. But if you want to know more, I also have a book that I have produced called Krishna's Way Natural Living. I had run out of it, so I gave out my last copy yesterday. So, but anyone who's interested can speak to me, we can arrange for you to get the book. It's really directly about going back to the land. It sounds like a shot for most of us, but it's the way people lived for thousands of years. This, what we say, industrial technological society is just a phenomenon that came about 300 years ago. Before then, people more in community, more simple, both sharing labor, sharing resources. Now we have to work just to get whatever we need. And then now, of course, that is also changing. You have to work harder to get what you used to get when you work less. It's becoming now more and more. Anyway, that's another subject matter. Okay, thank you very much, Srila
The program tomorrow, we have a Monday evening home program at Park and then Tina Maharaj. So when you get that communication, please you can see myself or Maharaj. I don't see them, so we're dealing with names. So this will come first time. Okay. Maharaj is giving a home program tomorrow at the Park and Tina Maharaj's house tomorrow evening 6 o'clock. So you're all welcomed. And then you will be leaving on Tuesday. And then since we are already late, 1:15 Maharaj, Kirtan time is also over Prasadam time. So we usually end up with the Nashima prayer. We can sit and complete Nashima prayer, we can move to the Prasadam.
Everybody knows these prayers? By praying to Lord Vishnudev, he gives you protection from material disasters, suffering. He destroys material illusions and he uproots material attachments. Very powerful one. Namaste Nada Sringhaya.
Namaste Nada Sringhaya.
Namaste Nada Sringhaya. Gaur Premanande, Prabhupada ki